They found part 2 of the Satanic Bible, and it's worse than you think. It started with the smell. Old paper, mildew, and something else, something acrid like burnt offerings. My apartment reeked of it. Fitting, I suppose, considering my life was in similar condition, a smoldering ruin of academic promise. I'm Elias Thorne, or I was Dr. Elias Thorne, religious historian. Once held the esteemed chair of ancient religions at the university. Now, I teach remedial English to bored freshmen and spend my evenings wrestling with a whiskey bottle that's usually winning. The scandal? A bit complicated. Involved a misattributed codex, accusations of academic fraud, and a rather unpleasant shouting match with the dean that ended with me packing my boxes. Let's just say ancient texts and I were no longer on speaking terms, until Sarah showed up. Sarah Jenkins. Bright, enthusiastic, annoyingly optimistic. She was one of those grad students who actually believed in the power of ancient texts. I usually wrote them off, but there was a steel in her eye that intrigued me. Dr. Thorne, she said, standing in my doorway, a thick leather-bound book clutched to her chest like a lifeline. I think I found something important. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Sarah, with all due respect, I'm not doing house calls, and I'm certainly not authenticating some supposed artifact you found in the library basement. But it's different, Doctor. Thorne, it's powerful. I think it's the second part. The second part of that, the Satanic Bible. Anton LaVey's masterpiece of theatrical nihilism. The idea was ludicrous, but the look on her face, I let her in. The book was undeniably old. Heavy, bound in what looked like human skin. I hoped it was just treated leather. The pages were yellowed, brittle, filled with elaborate illustrations and text in a language I didn't recognize. It was a mix of Latin, Hebrew, and something else, something guttural, alien. Where did you find this? I asked, the whiskey suddenly tasting like ash in my mouth. Hidden behind a false panel in the rare books section, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Nobody knew it was there. I ran my fingers over the script. It was too perfect, too consistent. Sarah, this is a forgery, an elaborate one, but a forgery nonetheless. No, it's not, she insisted. I can feel it, Dr. Thorne. It's real. It's calling to me. I scoffed, but I couldn't deny the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I took a deep breath. All right. Let's say hypothetically this is what you think it is. What exactly do you expect me to do about it? Translate it, decipher it, understand it. That was my first mistake. Agreeing to help. Curiosity. That old, familiar demon had sunk its claws in. We started slowly, carefully. I focused on the linguistic aspects, trying to identify the unknown language. Sarah, fueled by an almost manic energy, researched the symbols and illustrations. The more we uncovered, the more unsettling things became. The rituals detailed in the manuscript weren't the philosophical mumbo-jumbo of LaVey. These were darker. Sacrificial. They spoke of summoning entities, of opening gateways. The language was violent, visceral, filled with a hatred that seemed to seep off the pages. The nightmares started soon after, vivid, horrifying visions of blood and fire. I'd wake up screaming, soaked in sweat, the smell of sulfur clinging to the air. I chalked it up to stress, to the cheap whiskey, but deep down I knew it was more than that. Then came the sounds, whispers in the dark, scratches on the walls, a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it, but it was always there, a constant, insidious presence. Sarah, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly withdrawn. Her initial enthusiasm had morphed into a disturbing obsession. She barely slept, barely ate. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. She spoke in cryptic phrases, quoting passages from the manuscript. "The veil is thinning, Dr. Thorne," she'd say, her voice barely a whisper. "They are listening." I started to regret ever getting involved. I should have walked away, burned the book, forgotten the whole thing. But something kept me tethered, a morbid fascination with the darkness that lay within its pages. Then the murders started. The first victim was a young woman found in an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. Her body was arranged in a bizarre, ritualistic pose. Symbols were carved into her skin, symbols that I recognized, symbols from the manuscript. Detective Mark Olson, a man with eyes that had seen too much, showed up at my door. He was polite, professional, but I could feel his suspicion. "Dr. Thorne, we understand you're a scholar of ancient religions," he said, his gaze unwavering. "We were hoping you could help us identify some symbols found at the crime scene." I played dumb. I lied. I told him I'd never seen anything like it before. But I knew. I knew exactly what those symbols meant. The second murder was even more gruesome. A local businessman found in his home, his body mutilated, his blood used to paint symbols on the walls. Again, the symbols from the manuscript. Olson was back, his eyes harder, his questions more pointed. I could see the pieces clicking into place in his mind. The disgraced professor, the ancient manuscript, the ritualistic murders. I needed help. Someone who understood this kind of thing, someone who could guide me through the darkness. I called Father Michael. Father Michael had been my mentor, my guide, when I was a young, idealistic student. He was a scholar of the occult, a man who had dedicated his life to understanding the forces that lurked beyond the veil. He was also a devout Catholic, a man of unwavering faith. I hadn't spoken to him since the scandal. I was ashamed, embarrassed, but I was desperate. I drove out to his parish, a small, unassuming church nestled in the hills outside of town. He was older than I remembered, his face etched with worry lines, but his eyes still held that familiar spark of intelligence. I told him everything. About the manuscript, about the murders, about the growing sense of dread that had consumed me. He listened patiently, his expression growing more grim with each word. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Elias," he said, "you've stumbled upon something very dangerous, something that should have remained hidden." He told me about the history of the manuscript, that it was rumored to be the second part of the Satanic Bible, but that it was far more than just a collection of rituals and incantations, that it was a key, a gateway to something ancient and malevolent. "This isn't just about Satanism, Elias," he said. "This is about something far older, far more powerful, something that predates Christianity, predates even humanity itself." He warned me to destroy the manuscript, to sever all ties to it. He said that it was corrupting me, that it was opening me up to forces I couldn't possibly comprehend. But it was too late. The manuscript had already taken root. The voice had already begun. It started as a whisper, a subtle suggestion in the back of my mind. But it grew stronger, more insistent. With each passing day, it told me things, showed me things. It promised me power, knowledge, understanding. It also told me what to do. It told me to find Sarah. Sarah had disappeared. I hadn't seen her in days. I tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I went to her apartment, but it was empty. The voice told me where to find her. It led me to an abandoned mill on the outskirts of town. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something metallic like blood. Inside, I found them, a group of people dressed in black robes, chanting in a language I didn't understand. They were gathered around an altar, and on the altar lay Sarah, her eyes wide with terror. Leading the ritual was Professor Armitage, my rival, the man who had orchestrated my downfall. "Welcome, Elias," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "We've been expecting you." He explained that they were a cult dedicated to the manuscript, that they had been searching for it for years, that Sarah was the key to unlocking its true power. The voice told me what to do. I knew the ritual, I knew the incantations, I knew how to stop them. I stepped forward, raising my hands. "Stop," I shouted. "You don't know what you're doing," Armitage laughed. "On the contrary, Elias, we know exactly what we're doing. We are opening the gateway. We are bringing forth the Ancient Ones." He continued the chant, his voice growing louder, more frenzied. The air crackled with energy. The ground began to shake. I started reciting the counter-ritual, my voice a low, guttural growl. The words felt alien on my tongue, but they were there in my mind, imprinted by the voice. The cultists stopped chanting, turning to stare at me in horror. Armitage's face contorted with rage. "You traitor," he screamed. "You will pay for this." He lunged at me, a dagger in his hand. But I was ready. I sidestepped his attack and grabbed his wrist, twisting it until the dagger fell to the ground. I didn't want to kill him, but the voice did. I snapped his neck. The cultists screamed and scattered, but it was too late. The ritual had been disrupted. The gateway was collapsing, but something had already come through. A wave of darkness washed over me, engulfing me, consuming me. I felt myself changing, transforming. The voice became louder, more insistent, taking over my mind, my body, my soul. Father Michael arrived, bursting through the door, a crucifix in his hand. "Elias, no," he cried. "Resist it, resist the darkness." He charged at me, holding the crucifix aloft. But I was too strong. The voice was too strong. I grabbed him by the throat and squeezed. His face turned blue. His eyes bulged. He clawed at my hands, but it was no use. I snapped his neck. Sarah screamed, but I didn't care. The voice didn't care. The ritual was complete. Detective Olson arrived moments later, guns blazing. He managed to take down some of the cultists, but he was too late to save Father Michael. He turned his gun on me, his face a mask of fury and grief. "You monster," he shouted. "I'm going to kill you," he fired. The bullets ripped through me, but I barely felt them. The voice protected me. The voice healed me. I turned to Olson, my eyes glowing with an unholy light. He stared at me in horror, his gun trembling in his hand. I smiled. "It's too late, Detective," I said, my voice a distorted echo of my own. "It's already begun." Olson managed to get Sarah out, but I didn't try to stop them. They were insignificant now, pawns in a larger game. The mill burned that night, consuming the bodies of the cultists, the remains of the ritual, the last vestiges of my former life. I watched it burn, the flames reflected in my eyes. I tried to destroy the manuscript, but it was indestructible. It was a part of me now, as much as my own flesh and blood. I'm not Elias Thorne anymore. I'm something else, something more. The voice is still there, whispering in my ear, guiding me, directing me. It promises me power, knowledge, understanding. It promises me a future far darker than I could have ever imagined. The voice whispered, "It is time, Elias. Part 3 awaits."